a mystery.
Well, Cornelia Meyer, CEO of MRL Corporation, is here to go through the papers with us this morning. Good morning, Cornelia. Nice to see you. All right, let's start with events in the Sahara, in the Algerian desert. Obviously having a massive impact on the Algerian economy, which relies to the tune of 97% on oil and gas for its exports.
Yes, and it has an impact on oil and gas, and but you know, you have to go where the oil is. So I'm not that worried that you know, oil companies will then forget and go back in. But you know, oil and gas generates very few jobs, and they have big unemployment. So what Algeria really needs is manufacturing, agriculture, all those good things that give jobs to this youth bulge that we see in the Middle East, North Africa region. And for those companies who are much less manufacturers, agricultural companies, they're much less adventurous and willing to deal with the geopolitical risks than oil and gas companies, for those companies it's a big deterrent.
No, absolutely, and I'm glad you raised the jobs, because that is, I mean, what Algeria has, I think, has 38 million people. It has 10%.
It has more. These are the official figures.
Oh, right, okay.
And they're fudging them.
In terms of unemployment, you mean?
Yes,
right.
It is impossible that you have in Egypt, which has actually has more economic activity, higher unemployment than in Algeria. It's just impossible.
The point is that a country like Algeria needs to use the resources it gains from all of these natural resources and put it into other sectors.
And find foreign investors to help them, especially manufacturing, you know, things where you need labor.
Okay, let's move on to the China Daily, and touching upon an issue that is affecting the East China Sea. It's affecting relations between these two countries. They need each other economically, but this particular story is about a gesture, and gestures are vital in this culture.
Yes, and it's about a gesture, but I can see Mr. Hatoyama, and I have to declare here that I used to be advisor to a minister who then became Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, who was in the faction of Mr. Abe, which is now the Modi faction. And they are more hardliners, and Mr. Abe's father and the founder of the faction, Mr. Fukuda, were very close to Taiwan. So there is, Hatoyama was always more open. So you have this inter-Japanese, which foreigners are not really that interested in, a hardliner versus more softer stance towards China.
But does this mean that there is diplomatic activity taking place to try to ease the tensions between China and Japan?
Yes, but it's ill-guided. You should really check with your government first if you're a former prime minister before you go out and make statements. It would be like, let's say, President Bush going out and making a visit somewhere where Obama is not quite in line with it.
This story doesn't seem to be going anywhere fast in the sense of a resolution, especially if you look at read the Japanese statement from the government today. Yeah. So you've got to ask, who's going to, we keep saying that both, you know, they need each other. Who's going to budge first? Because if you look at the Japanese exports, the car sales, everything into China, it's fallen off a cliff.
Yes, and I think there will, what we need is, what Hatoyama did was actually very good, had he just consulted. Easing on the whole war legacy would really be helpful, and that might give them a little bit of stance with regard to the islands.
Sure. Okay, let's move on. Let's do the Frankfurter. Allgemeine, isn't it?
Allgemeine.
Allgemeine. Thank you. Frankfurter Allgemeine. And talk about Boeing's continued nightmares for the Dreamliner. Yeah. Look, this is it's a tough one. I think the story on this one is focusing on poor old Lot, the Polish carrier that took delivery of their 787, landed in Chicago, and the FAA.
And are doing the very American thing of going right round and suing. But look, when you have big projects, be it a big new a turbine to produce electricity, gas turbine, or a big new aircraft, you will always have these teething problems. And generally you have the costs, the time, you have to cost around, time around, and then you need to think in terms of about $1 billion to just throw at it with all the teething problems. Yeah. So we shouldn't be too hard on Boeing, but it's been very disastrous for the share price.
And I think that's a valid point. I mean, Airbus had the big, a lot of problems with the A380, and And
and GE, when GE had started the F technology for gas turbine, heavy-duty gas turbines to produce electricity, you know, it didn't work in the beginning, and they threw hundreds and hundreds of millions at it, and then it worked.
But it will cost, won't it? I mean, it's going to cost Boeing. I mean,
it will cost Boeing to the tune. I would say we're talking around $1 billion here.
Right. Okay.
But they're a big company. They can
of course they can. They're the biggest plane maker in the world as of yesterday. Those numbers came out.
Let's have a look at the Times now, the business section. And the boss of Rio Tinto is being penalised in a way that perhaps we haven't seen in the corporate world for some time. No payoff. It's got to give up the bonuses for 2 years. Is this representative, perhaps, of a tougher corporate climate?
It just shows what a good board can do. The board acted, got rid of him. They had $14 billion to write down, and the share price only dropped a few cents because they said, OK, here are the two guys, the head of strategy who had this disastrous coal mine project in Mozambique, and the CEO who had these bad acquisitions. And so let's get rid of them, and let's take the guy who is who has the biggest, who does iron ore, which is very profitable, and put him in the seat. It shows how important it is that boards act swiftly.
Yeah, OK. Shall we quickly move on to our last story? Burgers, beef, not beef, bit of horse in there. Is there a problem with that?
Yes, I mean, I write, so as somebody who writes very regularly, I could not eat horse meat, and I'm off burgers until they show me that it's only beef. Yeah. But I think it's a problem if you sell something as beef. You know, you have to sell what's in the can.
Martine used to ride cows, but she has no problems eating them, do you?
That is unkind.
But the interesting thing really is basically what goes into our food and labelling and how much we know about what we're buying, I suppose. But anyway, I'm afraid we are running out of time, Cornelia, having posed that rather provocative question. But thank you very much indeed, Cornelia Meyer, for coming in and taking us through the papers. And thank you very much for being with us here at BBC World News. Sorry.